thank you, and Your Excellencies, thank you for joining us for this moment of exchange. I will try to put into a legal perspective some of the concepts that you have already heard from my colleague Gilles Fontaine, and what you certainly also have been discussing in your meetings, namely buzzwords such as the impact of COVID on the media landscape, artificial intelligence, Audiovisual Media Services Directive, and inclusion and diversity. But let me start with a little quote that will help me guide you through these topics into the legal context. And if you follow the chat box, you will see that my colleague Alison Handuff would also put some links in case you would like to look more into the details of what I'll mention. Mark Twain said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And on the 9th of January, maybe some of you were there at the New Year's reception of the observatory, I made a little speech where I drew a parallel between the decade we entered, the 2020s, and the other 20s, the roaring 20s. The 20s, they were a period of extraordinary economic cultural development. It was the beginning of Hollywood golden age, the jazz age, but it was also the period of a second industrial revolution, bringing spectacular technical innovations and also scientific advances. There was one thing I forgot to mention, though, at my little speech, and that was that beginning of the 1920s, the world was suffering from a deadly pandemic. It was the so-called Spanish flu. And I would say nobody, maybe except Bill Gates and some virologists, would have expected at that time, on the 9th of January, that a couple of months later we would be submerged by this tidal wave called COVID-19. So history indeed rhymes. Now, this global health crisis induced by the COVID-19 pandemic, it has become really an economic disaster for many aspects of the audiovisual sector. Fortunately, both the public and the private sector in Europe are stepping in to provide support measures that aim at allowing the audiovisual industry to bridge this crisis. And the European Audiovisual Observatory has made its own little contribution to this effort by providing a tool to monitor the measures taken in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. We have set up a tracker which contains already more than 1,000 measures and is updated on an ongoing basis on our website. These measures, they may be specific to the film and audiovisual sector. They may also broadly target the cultural and creative industries, and they include a wide range of regulatory tools. It can be public support, regulation, guidelines, industry agreements, policy statements. And we have also included in this tracker some more general overarching measures which are more of a cross-sectorial nature, such as support measures for enterprises or SMEs, or measures for workers and freelancers, when they are, of course, of relevance for the audiovisual sector. Now, this tracker is a useful tool for anyone who would like to find some measures taken at national and international level, but it doesn't provide an analysis. And for this reason, we try to fill this gap with a report which organizes the information that is contained in the tracker in a comparative manner, helping the reader to understand the diversity of the approaches, interests, and measures taken, and also puts together some relevant information that we gathered thanks to the stakeholders that are part of our advisory committee, and which helped us also build a documentary film that we even showed at the Cannes Online Film Festival this year. Now, through this comparative analysis of the different approaches taken between regulators and industry stakeholders, the reader really gets with the feeling and also the understanding of the diversity of the approaches that have been put in place for all the different branches of film and audiovisual sector. And we looked at production, distribution, exhibition, festival events, broadcasting, and VOD, so really the full spectrum. But as you may know, since human rights were mentioned, COVID-19 is not just an economic crisis. The COVID pandemic has had a huge impact on media pluralism, and this has happened both in terms of reduced external pluralism, because a number of diverse players has shrunk. They simply did not survive the economic crisis, and also in terms of less internal pluralism because of the restrictions to journalists to access sources, and also because of the absence in certain cases of strong public service media. And this is a very important thing to remember. The pandemic has also brought an epidemic of fake news, the so-called infodemic. And this reminds me of another quote. This is what Hannah Arendt once said: if everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything any longer. And the people that no longer can believe anything is deprived not only of its capacity to act, but also of its capacity to think and to judge. And here I think the human rights perspective comes in very clearly. And because in the profound crisis we are going through now, these words, they ring truer and scarier than ever. It's already difficult for the layman to think about and to judge complex medical information, but here we are overwhelmed by a plethora of divergent opinions about the nature, the origins, the effects, and the evolution of the pandemic. And what can make it truly impossible for citizens and governments to handle this crisis is, of course, when disinformation also is maliciously spread in order to steer informational chaos in our societies. And this is when public bodies do have to make a stand and ensure that the objective of countering disinformation is not pursued introducing disproportionate restrictions on press freedom. And all this we follow in our publications when we look at the measures being taken. But now, coming back to the quote of Mark Twain with which I started, history doesn't repeat itself, but often rhymes. And also coming back to my little speech at the New Year's reception, I had a good reason for mentioning the Roaring Twenties and its spectacular technical innovations and scientific advances. This is because in today's 2020s, there is a technological revolution taking place, and this is artificial intelligence. This really roars. And it roars so much that it also scares many people. Just think about Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX and CEO of Tesla. He said, we should be very careful about artificial intelligence. It may be our biggest existential threat. He didn't speak about COVID, not climate change. He spoke about artificial intelligence as the big threat. And yet everybody is talking about it. We are writing about it. More and more economic companies are using it. And it is the future. So this also brings us to the work that also the Council of Europe is doing in this field, starting with the question, what is AI, artificial intelligence? It is certainly not the dystopian vision that is served by Hollywood in many films like 2001, Space Odyssey, Blade Runner, Terminator, not yet at least. So I'm afraid that, and this was also what we discovered, that the answer to the question, what is AI, is much more prosaic than all this. In the end, AI is computers being computers, software code gulping tons of data and using all this raw information according to predefined instructions. And it's the instructions that is the key. And of course, the potential is also inspiring. Now, medicine, economics, transportation, energy, you name it. And the practical implications are limitless. But this does not come without risks. There is also a dark side of AI, but probably not as dramatic as Elon Musk would have us believe, not yet. So coming to AI in the audiovisual industry, as in other sectors, the increased use of artificial intelligence is really likely to herald a paradigm shift. It can transform the entire value chain, from content production, programming, advertising, to consumers' expectations and behaviors due to the abundance of offers and devices, and not least the personalization of the content. And on the dark side, AI can contribute to proliferation of fake news. It raises issues concerning the user's rights to information, media diversity, pluralism, data protection. So human rights dimension, you see, is enormous in this area. And last year, the European Audiovisual Observatory decided to take a closer look at these effects. We organized a workshop to discuss the opportunities and the challenges raised by AI in the audiovisual sector. And we gave a focus on the journalistic field and on the film sector. In next few weeks, we will be publishing a big report that explores different issues concerning AI in the media sector. We will try to explain, at least contributing to the discussion, what AI is. We will delve in particular into the AI black box problem, and the black box is the lack of transparency in how AI systems operate, make the decisions, and we will also look into how explainable AI could be made possible. The report will look at the regulatory problems that are thrown up by the collection and use of big data, provides an overview of all the issues that concern the impact of AI on freedom of expression and information, and also in specific fields of the media where AI may have a profound impact on the future, like cultural diversity, copyright, personality rights, and advertising. So all this was, of course, a bit in the course when we started this year, but it turned out to be, in any case, a very unusual year for us. We were planning to look towards the future of the AI and what I just mentioned, but then we had suddenly to adapt to the new priorities created by this very concrete situation, the COVID pandemic. But despite everything, we never kept out of sight our mission, which is, in the end, as our name says, to observe the European audiovisual landscape and seen from the department I lead from a legal perspective. And had the pandemic not happened, probably our main topic would have been to observe this year the implementation of the Audiovisual Media Services Directive into the legislation of the EU member states. Today, the European Commission launched an infringement procedure against 23 of the member states, and we would have been looking at this. We will certainly do it, but that would have been our core topic to say. This directive, as you certainly know, regulates EU-wide coordination, both of national legislation on all audiovisual media, TV broadcasts, on-demand services, and transposition was due in September, 19th of September, but well, as the infringement procedure shows, this has not yet happened across many member states. COVID-19 has delayed certainly the work of many legislative bodies, so it can also be expected that now the transposition of the directive will be the work of the next months. And we are following it closely in another tracker that you can find on our website. Now, one of the most relevant aspects, and the only one that I would like to mention with regard to the AVMS directive, concerns the new rules on video sharing platforms. Before the amendment of the revised AVMS directive, video sharing platforms, they were regulated mainly through the e-commerce directive, an old piece of legislation dating 2001. And now, with the revised tool, there are specific rules to be put in place in order to protect children from harmful content, protect the general public from illegal content, notably incitement to violence and hatred, and certain aspects on commercial communications. On this, we've been asked by the European Commission to produce a mapping report in order to look at what is the state of art in the European member states, and also what are the legislative changes in course of adoption. We also organized an online session on this topic during the conference, the presidency conference of the German EU presidency. So this is a topic there where you will hear more from us next year. Now, talking about online events, COVID certainly has changed the way we communicate. The fact that we are here meeting in a video conference shows this clearly. And our annual workshop, which usually is a way of gathering experts in Strasbourg, enjoy Christmas market, and also have a beautiful time together, will happen online. For this year, we have chosen a very topical issue: diversity and inclusion in the European audiovisual industries, both on and off screen, and we will discuss the following question. How can Europe ensure better respect for diversity and inclusion in its cinema, television, and VOD industry? There has been for a long time a keen awareness of the principles of equality and non-discrimination that are very classical principles based on gender, origin, religion, disabilities. But more recent social changes, in particular those concerning position of women in the workplace or the Black Lives Matter development, they have meant that diversity and inclusion have come more in a sharper focus. So here the questions are, for example, what happens with the audiovisual industries in Europe? How are they ensuring better diversity and inclusion? What about the on-screen representation of society in film and series and in other audiovisual content? Well, to discover that, please join our workshops. It's on the 10th of December at 3 o'clock. And I'm sure you will have an interesting couple of hours because we have invited a quite good selection, I think, of experts to join us. So this is also to show you another face of how we work. And otherwise, I am available for any question, and I thank you very much.